videos correcting and you're able to hear me okay. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. This is our Landscape Design 101. It's a 3-part series that we're doing, and you can see on the screen the 3 dates that we'll be doing this, and they do build upon each other, and you can follow along and create a landscape design throughout this webinar series. So you can attend them individually, but also they do build upon each other. So the reason we're doing this series is because designing a landscape can be a challenge. There's a lot of elements that work together to make a landscape. And throughout this series, we're going to talk about the elements of designing a landscape from the very beginning. So you can see that's how we'll be able to actually create a design along with the series. So this morning, you'll see the picture on your left. That is me, Anya Solanas. I'm the Residential Horticulture Extension Agent and Master Gardener Coordinator with UF-IFAS Extension here in Polk County, Florida. And our Florida Friendly Landscaping Coordinator, Julie Shelb, also conducts many of our webinars as well. And we do have a Master Gardener, Sue, who is helping out co-hosting today. So just a little bit about joining Zoom. So you'll see we're going through and muting everybody and turning off videos and stuff just to make it a little bit easier. If you have an issue, either with the video or the sound or something when you're logging in, you can see there is a chat box. So you can see on the screen here what it looks like to get to the chat box. You should have a toolbar that will then show you a little icon that says chat box. And you should be able to click on that and you can send a chat and you can send it to everyone. But Sue is watching out the chat box if somebody has any issues, and if something goes on, you know, you can't hear me or something like that. She'll unmute herself and let me know. And then also, if you have questions as we're going along, you can type them in there. We'll probably hold most of those to the end, but then we'll go through and grab them at the end. You can unmute yourself at the end when I open it up for questions too. But I know sometimes it's hard and you kind of forget what you want to ask as you're going along. So if you think of them, you can put them in the chat box and we'll grab those as we go. We'll have an evaluation after the webinar as well. So any feedback you can provide to us is helpful so that we can make sure we're offering you what you are looking for when it comes to all of our webinars and workshops. And we are recording it so that hopefully you can use it to reference later. We'll usually share our recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. So we will go ahead here and get started. So just a little bit about this series. It's a 3-part series, and we'll go from the beginning stages of learning how to look at your existing landscape all the way to the final step of creating a design plan. So again, you can work along with us and create something. And that should be a usable design by the time that you are done. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about site inventory and analysis. A lot of these things we'll discuss today are kind of the building blocks for creating a landscape design. So this should help you as you move forward with the process. So where to start? So start at the beginning, obviously. We're going to take our time and do things correctly from the start. And the most important thing about landscaping really takes place before you plant anything in the ground. So we want to avoid any problems later that we might have in the landscape. And by problems, I mean overplanting, planting the wrong thing, losing plants, having issues with watering, that sort of thing. So we're going to take our time and do a lot of planning, and that's what's really important and we're going to talk about today. So we're going to have our goals be aiming for a low maintenance landscape, and we're going to combine anything existing into our landscape. So just because you're doing a landscape design doesn't mean you need to, take out everything. Certainly people will have things that they want to keep that are low maintenance, easy to use, large trees, that sort of things they want to keep in their landscape. But then you'll also have things, you want to remove, maybe overgrown shrubs, things that are dead, don't do well in the landscape. And we'll talk about how to do that as well. And we're going to talk about following the Florida-friendly landscaping principles. And I've listed them here. I'm not going to go into detail of all of our principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. You can find out more about the principles online at our FFL website, and it's ffl.ifas.ufl.edu. And Sue can type that in the chat box for you. We can add that in at the end as well. But we do have a Florida-friendly plant guide and handbook as well that I can give you references to at the end. So you'll have all of this information to utilize on your own as you go through to create your landscape design. So this is just kind of an example of a design that shows ample use of small shrubs, ground covers that require very little pruning. You can kind of see probably how new landscaping has been combined with existing landscaping to create a Florida-friendly yard. So existing trees are far enough away from the eaves, plant sizes are suitable for the location. Much of the plant material is low maintenance, native, Florida-friendly plants. So this is kind of what we're looking to achieve in our webinar. So we want to look at our landscape in enhancing the beauty of our home and fitting into our neighborhood and the aesthetics of that as well. We want to moderate the climate, and we'll talk a little bit about trees and how they can do that. And then, of course, as we integrate the principles of Florida-friendly landscaping, how our healthy landscapes can minimize runoff, pollution, and reduce water use. So there are many sources out there to help you in your design process, and I'll give you many of those. But we want to really emphasize that this part could take a while. The planning should take a little bit so that you have a really great plan after doing an extensive site inventory and analysis that you'll be able to use for the life of your landscape. So this is your kind of your to-do list. I know it looks kind of long. There's a lot of words here, but just number one, know your site for plant selection and activity location, and we're going to go through all of these individually. Number two, remember the user by considering what you want and need out of your landscape. Number three, use a form or style theme to determine shapes, organize spaces, and we'll talk a lot about that as well. Four, create links between spaces by designating activity areas. Five, consider the function of plants for the environment and the user. Six, structure the plantings by using massing and layering techniques. We'll probably talk more about that next week. Seven, highlight important points such as transitions and focal points. We'll talk a lot about that, as well as number eight, paying attention to detail. That means different materials, different colors, textures, forms and shapes of plants as well. And then number nine, take time to account for the growth and maintenance of your plants. And we'll talk about that when we get to figuring out how much space you have and laying out your design. And a lot of that will build upon what we talk about today with doing an inventory and analysis. And then we also want to think about our natural resources and how we can protect those by using sustainable design practices. So this is our little outline of how we're going to create a landscape plan. And you can see here today we're going to talk about site inventory. That's the first thing that we'll do. And then we'll move into a site analysis, which we'll also talk about today. And after that, we'll kind of be able to figure out our needs based on that. So what do we want to have happen in our landscape? What do we want to do in our landscape or not do in our landscape? And we're going to be using the things that we find out in our inventory and analysis to determine those things. After that, we'll be able to create a landscape design, concept plan, and then at the very end, after we have our plan kind of set out, we'll finally talk about plant selection and placement in the landscape. So that'll be the very last part of this process. All right, so we're going to move right into our first to-do item, and that is taking a site inventory. And a site inventory is basically going through your property that you're going to be designing. So it may be that you're going to be doing your whole landscape, front yard, backyard, side, whole property line. It also could be that maybe you're just wanting to redesign, a small bed in the front yard, or, along the back fence line, anything like that. Doesn't matter the size of your design area. We still want to do all of these things. So, that's kind of the main thing to remember. It's going to be the facts and information about the site that you're going to be designing. So again, remember that as we're going through. So all of our facts, so our soil type, these are things that are not going to change as we move forward in our landscape design. So your soil type and pH are, for the most part, are not going to be changing. Your driveway may not be changing unless that's something that you plan to do. Maybe you want to take out your driveway and redesign it or something like that. But if it's going to be staying, that needs to go in your inventory. Large trees, plants that won't be removed. Your drainage patterns probably won't change either unless you're going to be doing some sort of grading or something. Our utility lines, our sidewalks, our streets, anything like that. That's all the stuff that's going to be there as we move forward in our design process. So there's lots of things to think about and note as we do our site inventory. It's important that we know, if we live in a homeowners association, a little bit about our covenants and what they are, because you may have certain things that you have to adhere to as you move forward through a landscape design process. So at this point, when we're talking about facts about our site, we want to pull any landscaping statutes or covenants that we may have in a homeowners association, so we make sure we're following those as we move forward. So for example, if you have a dead tree or a tree that doesn't do very well in your yard and you'd like to remove it, are you allowed to do that based on your homeowners association? Or a fence, if you have a fence that you'd like to replace as part of your landscape design, does your homeowners association require a certain type of fence or placement or that sort of thing? So be familiar, if you live in a homeowners association, with your guidelines. This is a good time during the design process to pull those out, because you don't want to get all the way through your design and find out that you need to change a bunch of things. That makes it really difficult. So some of these things here on the left are things that might be included in a homeowner association covenant in regards to landscape design. So this is an example, and I have a few here that'll show different ways that you can track and do a site inventory. And again, these are facts. So this slide here shows sun and light in a landscape, which are going to be really important as you figure out how you want to use your landscape. So most likely, if you're putting in a patio, you don't want to be putting it in the full sun if you plan to sit there in the afternoon. And it'll really dictate what type of plant material you put in as well. So monitoring light, sun, and shade in your landscape at different times of day are really important. So that's one of the main things you need to look for as you do your site inventory. This is another example of a site inventory. Lots of notes and things. There's lots of ways you can do an inventory. You can kind of make notes like this. You can walk around taking photos and making notes. You could even, upload photos into your computer and use paint or something like that to make, circles and put texts in and that sort of thing for certain areas. But as we move forward today, you'll see more of the things that you could be putting in the inventory. So removing shrubs, keeping trees, existing walkway, all of those things are really important to have in your inventory. Here's another example. This one has some arrows. You can see kind of the squiggly arrows in this one, which I think are really helpful showing how water flows in the landscape, particularly here when we have lots of high rainfall events. And if you have issues with drainage or runoff in your landscape, it's really important to realize where the water is going. So as you do your inventory, it's really helpful to conduct part of it if it's raining really hard. So you can either go outside and figure out where water goes, or kind of go from window to window in the house and watch, if there's an area that you know water just pours off the roof of your house. I would make note of that, because you may not want to put a really nice plant right there that would be continually beat down by rainfall. Or if you need to make some corrections to some drainage, areas that sit really wet all the time, areas that are very dry, if you need to kind of reroute some gutters, downspouts, put in a rain barrel, that sort of thing. That watching that water flow in your landscape is pretty important. So just to kind of recap again, our site inventory is all the facts, everything about your landscape that you're going to keep, things that are important to know. Existing trees, light conditions, rainfall and how the water flows, existing driveways, walkways, air conditioner vents, utility lines, both overhead and in the ground, pools, air conditioner units, fences, all of those types of things. So after you've done that, and that usually can take a little bit of time, it can be pretty time consuming to do a site inventory. And both of these things take a little bit of time, and they should, because this is where you're building everything that you need to create a really successful landscape design, and really only have to do it once. So a site analysis is basically what you want to do with what you have. So you've evaluated everything, you have all the facts, and so you say, okay, I just found out my entire yard is full sun. What do I want to do with that? How do I want to use my landscape? And you can see some questions here that you can kind of go through and ask yourself as you move forward. What are you going to do outside? Make a list. Areas of the yard you like to sit outside, places you don't, things you want to screen, views you want to enhance. All of those things are really important. So it gets to be a little bit more fun when you get to the site analysis, because you're kind of, thinking and making plans as far as what you want to be doing. So again, you can make a list of how you're going to use your yard. Do you need a yard for a pet or kids or certain games or whatever it might be? How much time do you want to spend on maintenance, if any at all? Do you pay somebody or want to pay somebody for maintenance, or you want to make this something you can do yourself? Favorite colors, what goes with your house and your neighborhood, HOA requirements, all of that. Favorite plants. Even next time, as we get into different textures and shapes of plants, you may have certain looks that you like in a landscape, and those are all really important. Are pets going to be using your yard? Children? Do you have allergies? Do you need to plant for a dog that likes to eat lots of plants? And so then maybe you need to look at a plant list for pet safe plant alternatives. So lots of things that you can consider as you move forward, and how you actually want to use your space. And we'll talk about some of those. So a theme. And it's important to know that your landscape helps create a sense of place. And so that means that the design and what you like and the plants that you're going to select relate to the surroundings. So again, referencing any HOA covenants that you might have, but things that you also like about your landscape and how you want to feel when you're out in your landscape as well. And so maybe you know what your style is. You probably do. Is it informal or formal? What about architectural style of your house or your neighborhood? Does it have a certain feel that you like and that you want to, fit in with that? Any traditions or cultures or personal expressions or things that you want to come out as part of the style of your landscape? And most people have a pretty good idea of that. We also want to think about our activity areas moving forward. So this will kind of help you as you have all of your facts, from your site inventory, as you work through an analysis, maybe you're like, oh, I'm not really sure what I want to do. Well, this is just some things to kind of generally help you think about your space in the landscape and how you want to use it and divide it up. So typically there are 3 zones that we think about. The front yard, which is public. So, this is the area of your landscape that for the most part you're designing for the people that look at your landscape and at your house and walk by and that sort of thing. And typically the part that the homeowner uses is the backyard, which is the private area. And then we've got our side yards, which are typically work zones. And we're going to kind of go through those here. So this is our front yard, our public zone. And usually in this zone, we want to have curb appeal. So this is again where we're, talking about the style of the house, the neighborhood, color preference, that sort of thing. High visibility, so everybody sees this. Focal points, so thinking about drawing your eye to certain things. So if you think about that with focal points with color, a good example is people that paint their front door a bright color. So in doing that, the eye automatically goes to the front door. And you can do the same thing with your landscaping as well. So lots of things that we can do in our front yard. In our side yards, this is our work zones. Typically there's utilities here, sometimes shaded. Usually there's a source of water. And we'll talk about some things that you can do in that side yard. And the backyard is usually the private space where you're thinking, this is the area I'm using for, pool, patio, evening, kids, pets, activities, that sort of thing happen back there. And so this is an example of a design that was drawn up kind of looking at those different areas and how they can be used around the landscape. So the entry area would be in the front. You can see the work area on the side and the bottom, and then on the top, which is the other kind of work zone of the house, the side yard is a dog run. So, it's still kind of a utilitarian area. And then the backyard is all the private usable space for the most part. And it's not always that way for every landscape, but typically that's how it goes. So usually in our plans, we look at functional lawns, pathways, work areas, and structures. And I'm going to show you some of those. So when we look at our plan, most people are going to want some sort of a lawn. You do not have to have a lawn, that is up to you. But if you do decide to have a lawn, in that you're going to be changing the shapes of landscape beds or installing a lawn or whatever it is, it's important that that is designed as an easy to mow and maintain area, and that the shape is easy for a lawnmower to get into and get out of and easily mow without mowing over other plants, particularly if this is something where you have a service that comes in. Usually they have a big mower, so they have to have that space to be able to get into the grassy area and get out of the grassy area without damaging anything else. So you may have to do some measurements, if you want something like in this picture here where there's kind of a small lawn space surrounded by plants or whatever it might be. You may have to think, okay, well, this commercial mower comes in, they need 6 feet to get in and 6 feet to get out. I need to make sure that I'm leaving that for them. Or if you have curves that are hard to handle for a lawnmower, those things need to be kind of thought about as well. So here's another example. The lawnmower could enter the space and easily handle the curves there. There's nothing that would be too difficult for a mower to handle. This space as well, you can see the mower can come in. It would go over a pathway here. You can see on the left there's kind of a mulched pathway with kind of a brick outline, and a mower could easily travel over that. Whereas if that was just planted with plants, clearly it would be taking out some plants as it went through. And perhaps you don't want a yard in your landscape. What could you do instead? Do you want to have the look of an evergreen ground cover, as we see here, where they've used Asiatic jasmine they've planted here to kind of mimic a lawn area with a ground cover instead. And that's just kind of an option if that's something you're looking for. Or maybe nothing at all that even looks like a yard or a solid evergreen ground cover type of a surface. So in this landscape, you can see it's a pretty big landscape with a lot of different plant material in it, but no obvious yard space. So again, this is personal preference, kind of depends what you're looking for, your aesthetics, all of your personal preferences come into play when creating a landscape design, which is what makes it really fun. Then we're going to look at pathways. Those are really important through the landscape. Um, they're going to add organization, access to certain areas, interest for sure, depending on what type of materials that you use. You can see here, and we'll go through a couple different materials that could be used. Again, personal preference. So irregular stones, circular stones. There's some stepping stones here. This is a pretty common thing when we talk about access. So here you can see on the right would be the garage, and then clearly the path goes to kind of the front porch, front door area. So if you didn't have a path there, but you frequently walk from the garage to the front yard or to the front of the house, how would you be doing that? Maybe you're wearing a path through the mulch, or as you see sometimes with large grassy spaces and open areas where people kind of, naturally walk a path and then it kind of wears into the lawn. That's an easy thing to say, okay, well, I see in my lawn here, I've created a natural path. I'm going to make it look like a path by adding stepping stones or something like that. And you can see how it's easy access to the front door, because if there wasn't a path there and it was full of plants, yet you wanted to make it easy to access, how would you do that without going all the way around? Here's some other options for pathways. So the picture on the left here, those are simple, small concrete squares you can buy everywhere. Again, really a very different look than the irregular stepping stones. Personal preference again. I like how they've taken these and combined them with this very small gravel and pine straw. So it's a very nice, neat look. You can certainly lay them all on stones or all on pine bark or whatever you want, but this I thought was just a little bit different in that they kind of have 3 different materials here that work really nicely together. And then the picture on the right shows some kind of natural steps. This is in Florida, which is amazing. This is a landscape that is quite hilly. It was a previously mined area, so lots of hills, and they've used kind of large stepping stone boulders to create some paths in the hilly landscape. And then our work area. So this is the side areas of the house. So we talked again about utilities being there, access to water, maybe a dog run, typically shaded. If there's shade in the landscape, there's usually an area in the side yard that's shaded. So this could be areas where you have, your air conditioner unit, your trash cans, your compost pile, your rain barrel. You may want to integrate a potting shed or potting bench in there. This is a very fancy potting bench, but you can certainly do any type of potting bench. This is a great place to do it, particularly if you do have access to water and your compost bin is there. You kind of want those all in the same area. So whatever type of potting bench works for you. You can see there's lots of different ways to build a small potting bench. Again, this is a good example of a work area. You can see kind of to the left behind the potting bench there, you can see the rain barrel, and then the compost is on the other side of the air conditioner unit, and then it can be transferred underneath the potting table there in that little black container for use at potting up plants and things like that. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, the side yard, that utility area, is a good place to do it. And then different structures you might want to add in your landscape. So it might be that it's organizing or dividing up spaces or adding interest. You do want to make sure if you're adding any type of structures, whether it's fencing, an arbor, anything that could be caught in high wind, we want to make sure that we've anchored and braced or cemented, something like that. So, if we have a hurricane event or really even just a high wind event, we don't want them falling over. So make a plan for how you're going to anchor those and brace them. Another structure that some people are interested in is an area for chickens. So you can see here, this is the little chicken house, and then the run is the little kind of fenced area that kind of goes to the back right of the photo. And that's something you can certainly, and I would integrate that into your landscape design plan. Greenhouse. So this is a fairly large greenhouse, but there's all different sizes and shapes and types of different greenhouses. If that's something that you're interested in, again, that could be part of your um, utility zone, or even as we move into the backyard, these could all be, placed in your landscape design back there. And then as we look at solving issues, because if we're making changes to our landscape and developing a plan, we probably have something going on in our landscape we don't really like, and it might be an issue. And many times we have to solve issues with drainage, usually from high rainfall events, roof runoff from gutters, however it might be. And I've seen lots of creative ways to kind of tackle either this picture on the left, you can see is kind of a dry riverbed they were just starting to put in. So if you have a V-shaped area in your roof and no gutters, could happen if you do have gutters too, but if you have no gutters, usually the water just pours off like a waterfall during a rainfall event. And so it'd be really hard to keep plants growing there anyway. And then the mulch is going to start running and all of that. So they've created a kind of a dry riverbed there. And then the photo on the right, if you can see the top right, there's a gutter, but then also around the perimeter in front of the bed as well, they've used some smaller size river rock to prevent runoff. So maybe you have some raised beds or some areas that are a little raised from, the driveway or the sidewalk or something like that, and you repeatedly have issues with runoff. You can use rocks and mulch to kind of help you combat that. Here's some other examples here. This one on the left, you could see this is a commercial property, but they're have used, again, mulch or rock where typically mulch would be. And if mulch was here, it would be washing off and creating a problem. This one on the top right, so this is right by the front walkway. The front walkway, you can see there, has been really hit many, many times with lots of runoff from the roof. So it's almost wearing away the cement. But the water there hits so hard that it washes all mulch. So the homeowner here has just taken some river rock and made a small area on both sides of the front walkway and prevents all that mulch from washing off. So that's not, we're solving a problem here without having to do a lot of work. And once you do this once, then the problem should be solved, which is what we're trying to do here with our landscapes. Also looking at ground covers. Something here you can see Asiatic jasmine, and this is used in areas where grass won't grow. So if you have areas that are high shade or areas that are hard to mow, or just areas that you've really had trouble growing the lawn, kind of wears away in certain areas, or, and as the lawn starts to have issues, you start to get weeds, and, that's never fun. So here you can see in these three photos, homeowners have taken a ground cover and use it as a substitute called a turf grass alternative. So we've used it to look like a lawn, but it's not lawn. So Asiatic jasmine is a ground cover that can grow in full sun or full shade, and it's evergreen year round. And in the photo on the left, you can see, this is typically an area that would be a grassy area, but they've used Asiatic jasmine instead. The top right photo, that's pretty shady. Be very hard to grow grass there. If you had grass, you can kind of see it on the left of that photo. As the grass kind of creep toward the tree, it would thin out a little bit and not look so good. So if you want that green look, using Asiatic jasmine there would work as well. And in the bottom right photo, you can see Asiatic jasmine used kind of on a little corner as well. Could be an area that's really hard to irrigate and just never done very well. And so looking to ground covers or increasing sizes and shapes of landscape beds might help out with any issues that you have as you move forward. So really think about tackling some of the problem areas in your landscape. so that you don't have those problems anymore. You know, you don't want to be doing a big landscape design and then realize, oh, you know, now I've done all this work and I'm constantly, you know, sweeping up mulch, or, you know, now I've got all these problems with runoff and that sort of thing. So we want to solve our problems as we're moving through. We also want it to look good. We want it to work with our natural surroundings. We want to take the time to do lots of experimenting on paper before we actually start implementing our plan. Okay. So this is kind of the first part of the landscape design process. It's a big part. It's a lot to do. You can certainly take all of this information and move forward to this part of the process if you would like. Again, this will take a lot of time to do an inventory and analysis in your own yard. Really, even if you're doing a very small portion of your yard, there's, you know, lots of things that you have to take note of and think about how you're going to use moving forward. So at this point, we'll stop with this part, and then, whoops, next time we will be able to gather any ideas or questions that you have as a result of this work. If you've decided to do it on your own this coming week, we'll take time at the beginning of next week's webinar to gather questions, ideas, comments, all of this today that we've talked about if you've worked through it on your own. So today we talked about conducting the site inventory and analysis, probably the most lengthy, most work of the whole part of creating a landscape design. So even if you start doing this process this week, it's highly likely that it'll take you more than 1 week or 2, or sometimes even 3 to get through all of this. It can take a lot of time. And again, it really should, because you want to make sure you're doing all of this right from the beginning. Okay, so don't feel like, oh, I've got to get all this done. I mean, if you're considering working through a landscape design, I would start on this, and then again, bring your questions next week. And we want to think about those 3 zones, if that helps you. This seems like a lot. Think about those 3 zones and how you can work with those zones, solve problems, create something that you will like the look of and be able to use. And just so it seems like, oh, I've just given all this information, I couldn't take notes quickly enough, I'm going to send you some resources in an email. I'm going to send you all of this. So this is information on landscape design, the design guide. We have a pattern book as well that will help you get started and really discusses in detail all the stuff I just talked about. So you'll have the resources, and I'll send this out in an email to you with your survey after this workshop. So you'll have all this to work through. Okay, so I will now take some questions if anybody